And let's go to Harare and speak to our correspondent, Aisha Ismail. Aisha, what's it like in Harare right now?
Lots of dancing and singing, and cars are hooting on the streets of Zimbabwe. People are celebrating. They say it is a new dawn for Zimbabwe. They are happy that President Robert Mugabe has finally decided to step down. I'm not sure if you're able to hear, but the cars are hooting. Cars are draped in the flag of the country Zimbabwe. People are dancing and singing. Lots and lots of jubilation in the streets of the capital, Harare.
Aisha, any idea what might have convinced Mugabe to step down in the end?
Well, it's interesting that his resignation came while members of parliament and members of the Senate were gathering to bring impeachment proceedings against him. In fact, the proceedings had already begun. They were about to start with a voting process when the Speaker of Parliament read out the letter of resignation from President Robert Mugabe. Of course, we know that President Mugabe has been under a lot of pressure to resign. He was fired by his ZANU-PF party as the leader of the party. He was given a deadline, 12 noon yesterday. He missed that deadline. He also then went on to try and convene a cabinet meeting this morning when only a handful of cabinet ministers turned up for that meeting. The impeachment process then started in Parliament. The interesting thing also was that the impeachment process was moved from Parliament to the nearby Rainbow Hotel, a bigger venue to allow ordinary Zimbabwean citizens to come into the hotel to watch the process unfolding right in front of their eyes. And as you heard in that clip that you played earlier, once the Speaker of Parliament announced President Robert Mugabe's resignation, everybody stood up, applauded, and sang and danced. There was just a lot of jubilation in and outside the Rainbow Towers.
Aisha, the last few days there's been a series of extraordinary events in Zimbabwe, and it all started, this crisis triggered by the firing of Mugabe's vice president. Remind us of the events over the last few days with the army intervening, taking control of the country, and then we thought Mugabe might resign on Sunday. He didn't. South Africa had sent envoys to negotiate with him, and now he has finally resigned.
That is correct. And the army were at pains to tell the international community that what they did was not a coup. They intervened because they felt there was a need for them to intervene after President Robert Mugabe fired his vice president, Emmerson Mnangagwa, who fled to nearby South Africa because he said he feared for his life. The army then placed President Mugabe under house arrest, took control of the Zimbabwean Broadcast Corporation, and also protected all government buildings. On Saturday, we saw hundreds of thousands of Zimbabweans pouring onto the streets, coming out and saying Mugabe's time is up and he must go. For the very first time in the history of this country, the ordinary people of Zimbabwe, the opposition parties, and the army stood side by side and spoke with one voice, and that is that Mugabe must go. And I guess that voice was so loud and clear that today he had no option but to tender his resignation.
Aisha, people, as we're seeing on our screens, are celebrating in the streets the end of 37 years of Robert Mugabe's rule. He came to power in 1980 when the country became independent. Now, his heir apparent is the vice president he sacked recently. So, really, this would be a continuation of the rule of the ZANU-PF party.
Well, political analysts have cautioned the people of Zimbabwe to be very, very careful about a premature celebration. But I think that people, political analysts and politicians from outside Zimbabwe should allow Zimbabweans to celebrate at least for a couple of days. This is a victory for Zimbabweans, but you are correct to say that it is a continuation of ZANU-PF party. But I also think that politicians are aware of the fact that people are not going to tolerate a continuation of being mistreated, undermined as they were under the Mugabe regime.